Hello, and welcome to the SIG Cluster Lifecycle meeting for Tuesday, November 28th, 2017. Today, most of the meeting is going to be dedicated towards planning for 1.10, led by Jace, but we had a couple of announcements first related to KubeCon, which is coming up next week. So the first thing, and I think this was covered last week, but just a reminder that Lucas and I are giving a SIG update for SIG Cluster Lifecycle, which is half an hour, I believe, next Tuesday afternoon. And then I'm giving a talk with Chris Nova about the cluster API, and Lucas is giving a talk about a deep dive into kubeadmin. So if you guys are interested in those, most people on this call probably know enough about all those topics. But certainly if you want to come to the SIG update, where we hope to have some interaction with other people who maybe aren't regular attendees, and if you want to come support us for the other talks, that would be great. We'd appreciate that. I was also planning on scheduling like a meetup for sort of Thursday afternoon, sort of at the end of the day, which we talked about on Slack a couple weeks ago. I noticed during last week's meeting, which I missed, there was a little bit of chat about this also, and I wasn't sure if people had agreed on a time or a venue. If not, I'm happy to keep arranging that. Lucas is shaking his head. If 6-ish p.m., I think that's about when the talks end, or slightly earlier than that, works for everybody, I'll set that up. If not, please ping me in chat or in Slack and suggest a different time. I think that time most people are probably still there. The conference haven't gone home yet, and even if people show up late, they'll be there. So hopefully that'll work for people.
That worked for me.
Yes. Yeah. The other thing, I was going to propose canceling next week's meeting, which is right smack in the middle of the Contributor Summit, which I know a number of people here are going to be at, including I think all of the leads. So unless somebody else wants to run that meeting, I'd propose canceling next week. And then I wanted to do a very, very quick check-in on the 1.9 release, because the 1.9 release is scheduled for the week right after KubeCon, and especially if we're not going to have a meeting next week, this is sort of our last chance to talk about hot issues coming up for the 1.9 release before it's too late to fix them. So I think we did a brief check-in last week as we were in code slush right before code freeze. But if there's anything you know about for 1.9, please mention it quickly now and add something to the meeting notes.
I know Lucas and I wanted to chat about whether or not, what we want to do about self-hosting and where we're going to land with it. I still have the problem with secrets. That's not going to go away. I don't think we can enable it without it. So, thoughts?
So the plan, as far as I know, is making self-hosting beta level support in 1.9. But we're not going to enable it by default due to lack of testing cycles, as this coding cycle is basically too short. So, well, beta, but not enabled by default as we had thought initially. And yeah, on the checkpointing secrets thing, well, that's up for the debate still, I guess. Yeah, Justin, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, we'll enable it now as an alpha feature, the checkpointing thing, but self-hosting with kubeadm is beta overall in 1.9. And hopefully both will, well, hopefully self-hosting will be the default in 1.10, and the checkpointing, bootstrapping checkpointing thing will be beta by then. Anything else?
So I had a quick question about that. Is there anything in the inherent structure of the way the self-hosting works where not having checkpointing and whatnot can lead to failure scenarios that are unrecoverable in terms of the control plane status and stuff like that? Or, I mean, because I know there was some concern about that before. So just from a cluster operator perspective, that's something that I'd be interested in knowing.
If you are self-hosting a single node cluster and you do not have checkpointing that includes secrets, which we have checkpointing that does not include secrets, because we didn't update the profiles for everything, right? And we're kind of going around in a circle debating upon whether or not it's a hard requirement or not. So if you don't have checkpointing enabled and you're running a self-hosted single node environment, if you, for whatever reason, if the node restarts, it will not recover, right? That is
okay. I had a feeling that there was a use case like that, so understanding that helps. Thank you.
So Lucas, you said that before we make it default, we need to do some testing things. Do we have that documented somewhere?
Well, basically a lot of manual testing, of course, but also automated testing. So we'll probably set up the automated testing suite tomorrow, something. I don't know when. Tim will send a small PR with the enabling thing, and well, then we have it in EDCI, but it's still just a week or so, right, before the cut at that point. So it's too little, in my opinion, to make defaults. But yeah, probably 110. So we have a full decent cycle for testing. I mean, yeah.
There was one other question about how much we wanted to document the Bootstrap checkpointing for this release.
Yep, I really don't want to document it unless we turn on self-hosting, because I don't even want people to know it's there, right? Because if you turn it on in this backwards fashion, you're probably going to and you tinker with it, you'd probably get yourself into more trouble than what it's worth. Because the whole purpose of us doing this has nothing to do with that feature itself. The whole purpose of doing this is all about self-hosting.
I agree with that. That's fine. I don't think we want other people testing it out, right? The point was for us to use it, not to make a general purpose feature. That's why we renamed it from checkpointing to Bootstrap checkpointing. So I'm happy to not document it. And if somebody really digs and finds it, that's okay. But we aren't going to put it out there as something we expect people to be using.
Sounds good to me. We'll update the features issue then. We still need documentation PRs for a couple of more features in the features repo. Fabrizio has made the great man page reference PR somewhere that I can't seem to find right now at my desktop. But anyway, that is to be merged today, maybe. And after that, we can update, there are dependencies on that, so we can update the general kubeadm docs after that, because the file structure basically changes in a sudden way. But yeah, I think documentation is yet to be done for some of the things, but Fabrizio has been very helpful in taking that on. If there are volunteers, that would be great as well to cover the last bits, like some small upgrade changes and so forth.
How much stuff is there to document? Or is there so you said upgrades, what else needs to be documented?
It's more about updating small things upgrade from 1.8 to 1.9 instead of upgrade from 1.7 to 1.8, and small tweaks that have changed, and most times also generally making the docs a little bit better. Well, could you help with? I mean, I could provide more detailed instructions.
Yep. Okay, I can probably help out with.
On Slack, yeah.
All right, one last call for 1.9 release stuff, and then we'll hand it over to Chase.
I could say a few words. We need to open a parent issue for the kubeadm, all the issues in the kubeadm repo, that is. I could probably create it if nobody else wants to do that. Basically to keep the communication channels with the release team in the same way, in a way that the release team can find easily with the 1.9 milestone in the core repo. Then we have, we have one large issue still, and that is rollbacking etd, which I thought worked between minor versions, but seemingly not. So, which I
don't think it's ever, they've never supported downgrade of any type, regardless of how much version skew there is.
I did note that the etcd, who owns etcd topic, came up as a proposed vote for the developer summit. So I hope everyone voted for that so we can have that incredibly non-controversial discussion.
Yeah, I stuck that on there at the last minute after we were going back and forth on email. If it doesn't, we should just grab Daniel and try to come to a consensus in the hallway.
Well, colorful statements that I'll avoid right now. Yes, let's talk later about it.
But just like what should we do with? So the user upgraded from 1.8 to 1.9, and they got an upgrade at etcd, which for some reason didn't work. We took a snapshot before, and we now want to roll back. Should we just leave the user as is? Like, well, we tried to make this thing. We tried to upgrade it to 3.1.10, but seemingly it didn't come up cleanly. Fix the thing and exit one. I mean, that's probably what we have to do.
Do we want to automate this, or do we want to spell it out as part of the upgrade process?
So
is this instructions or automation?
I would have preferred automation, and I thought that was possible, but then we can't either vendor the etcd CTL things, because they are, as far as I saw, most of the logic is private inside of the Go functions, like the packages there. There was some proposal to, do it in a better way and like make a generic library for these things, but that doesn't seem to be the case right now.
Just to clarify, the issue with etcd downgrades is that downgrades across minor versions of etcd don't work.
Okay. It never worked, or were never.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure why I assumed that, but anyway, yeah, I think so. So basically, but what about the downgrade scenario then? Like, we upgrade successfully to 1.9 and we want to downgrade to 1.8, then we should just leave etcd at 3.1.10, I guess.
You're technically fine. The etcd 1.8 was actually, because we version skewed everything, you're actually okay with the downgrade for the client side, or with not downgrading, with just leaving it at the version that you're at.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, Kubernetes 1.8 has the 3.1.10 client anyway, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So, okay. We need a PR to kubeinfo to do that. In other words, to not try to downgrade etcd on normal Kubernetes downgrades. But we'll fix that. I think Sergey has volunteered to help as well.
If they try to do multiple downgrades, can you downgrade, keep going down?
I don't think so. Well, KubeInfo supports upgrading or downgrading one minor version at a time. So, I mean, if you use different KubeInfo CLIs, you may be able to do that. But we didn't support downgrades either officially. Like, you had to do force to downgrade to 1.7. So, on a support level, we're fine.
I think just doing the naive thing seems reasonable, and document a more sustainable path for production grade environments. Like, do a snap, plan to restore in case you're doing this. Here's what things have changed. Because that's a general good practice anyways for people to do before they do an upgrade. And I don't think we actually spell that out as part of our documents yet.
I think there's something like, as a general good practice or something, back up your cluster, but we don't spell it out how to back up the cluster. So you could just leave some etcd CTL commands there.
Sure.
So kubeadmin will take care of the snapshotting before upgrade, though, but it won't restore anything.
Is that snapshotting in? Because I remember reviewing that pull request and it wasn't added, right?
Yeah, so we did in the initial, what's at head now is like a CP with the directory but I think we found how to do snapshotting with the etcd Go client. So that PR is already up. I think I'll review.
All right. I was hoping to keep the 1.9 stuff short. I think we could talk about it probably for the rest of our hour, but I do want to give as much time to Jace as we can. So I'm going to call this conversation now. If people want to keep talking, we can extend our meeting past 10, or folks that are interested can dial into a separate meeting. But I think we should turn it over to Jace and talk about 1.10 now and do some forward-looking planning.
Sounds good.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, and I want to thank everybody here too for giving me the opportunity to try out this process. Essentially, this is a forward-looking thing because this is the way we want to manage how things get into Kubernetes in the future and how other projects that connect to Kubernetes also manage the relationship. So I'm just going to go quickly through what we're trying to accomplish in this process, and then we'll go through the process of doing it, knowing fully well that this is not fully baked and you're sort of getting the alpha/beta testing of this, and we'll see how it goes. So feedback, constructive feedback after the fact with me privately in terms of things that this is missing or needs and whatnot, we'll go for that. So the process moving forward past 1.10 is going to be that essentially things that get moved into Kubernetes that are what might have been called features or proposals or all those things are going to be called KEP, and it stands for Kubernetes Enhancement Proposal. And essentially there's a architectural initiative around how we manage those, and really it's just a fancy way of saying there's a markdown document that says here's a big chunk of something we want to accomplish. It's going to take more than one release cadence to do it because it's big and releases are short and all that. And the KEP basically allows us to always sort of have a North Star that we're pointing to when we do work. So when I'm implementing a feature to do checkpointing, I know that ties into the greater operability story for KubeADM and self-hosting as a viable alternative for people, and that ties into the greater operational story of Kubernetes. So there's always a layer up of how whatever work you're doing, even at a PR level, is tying up to the KEP, the enhancement that we're trying to deliver. So keep that in mind as we go through this. The planning process is essentially where the sort of theoretical hand-wavy parts of the KEP get made real. And what we want to do is acknowledge that the features process as is really broken, and that it's cumbersome and doesn't actually accomplish what we want, which is making it easy to understand what we're trying to deliver and sort of what are the dependencies that maybe we have that we're not aware of out of the gate, or maybe things that will impact our timelines. So we want to ferret those out before we start doing the work so that we're not wasting time and effort on things that aren't going to get delivered. So hopefully this stuff is pretty simple and straightforward. So the process relies on somebody in a SIG sort of being the champion of the product planning. And my intent is that SIG PM or SIG somebody should be supplying a pool of people to help you do that. Hopefully somebody that attends the SIG meetings on a regular basis. If somebody in the SIG has a passion for product management and project management, I would love to have them sign up to be the person that's sort of keeping their eye on the ball to help the SIG facilitate these meetings and do updates for wherever they need to be done in terms of the community. I'm doing it right now because I'm passionate about this, and I have a deep love of Cluster Lifecycle's work and also the mission of cluster ops in general. So in the future, maybe this might not be me, but it would be nice to have somebody to staff this sort of role all the time to help you do what you need to do. So this process is essentially trying to identify major initiatives that are ready to be worked and committed to. So we're going to go through a document, and essentially we're going to say, what are the proposals that we know are being worked? And then what are the things from those proposals that we want to try and get done in 1.10? Again, not too complicated. I describe the KEP as an iceberg, and the issues that we want to work each milestone, each release, are sort of the ice cubes that we chip off and deliver. So we want to make sure that we're always chipping away at the great story and making sure that we're shipping increments of value each release. So there's a document link here. I'll share my screen. And this is a template that I have made that hopefully is useful. And essentially what we want to do is, and some of this will have to be populated later or maybe offline, but essentially we want to know what is the proposal, if there is one, and there may be multiple proposals. In this SIG, somebody want to sort of outline at the top level, what are the big proposals? Are those the working groups that you have organized, or is it mainly KubeADM work, or what does that look like from the portfolio of things you're working on?
So to clarify a couple of things, are KEPs nested within each other? So like you said, they sort of roll up. So we have the mission of Cluster Lifecycle is to basically make the installation experience and the upgrade experience better. And to accomplish that mission, we're building KubeAdmin, which is a tool. So is KubeAdmin a KEP underneath a KEP of the mission to create a better install experience? And then underneath KubeAdmin, do we have sub-KEPs of make the install go cleanly, build HA, do self-hosting, build upgrades? And like where does the rubber hit the road in terms of what are you looking for here? Is it that last layer? Is it the middle layer? Or is it the top layer?
Sure. So the SIG mission doesn't really correspond to a KEP. The idea is that you could pull out your deck of cards, your KEP cards, the things you're working on, and those should all, if you read them, like, oh, that's definitely empowering this part of the mission. That's definitely empowering this part. So it's not really, that's sort of the portfolio level of, we want to accomplish this grand mission, and here's the KEPs that will do that. Now, because SIG Cluster Lifecycle has this really interesting thing where you're managing essentially KubeADM as a product, Kubernetes itself will have KEPs. So there will be things like, enhanced RBAC or the auth system or whatever that is, the certificate authorities and all that. But those are going to be specific to Kubernetes. So for KubeADM, I would see KubeADM is going to have KEPs for each of the major parts of functionality that you're going to deliver into it. So essentially that's the top level of that process. There may be cases where you're doing work specifically in Kubernetes and not really anything to do with KubeADM specific work. That would be the KEP that lives under the Kubernetes org. So in this case, what we want to do is identify what are the sort of products that you're working on. So KubeADM is obviously one of them. What are the things in Kubernetes you're working on that would be sort of in this realm? And then we just outline the work associated with each of those things. Lucas?
Yeah, like Bootstrap tokens and the self-hosting thing, like checkpointing thing, I guess, are the two main ones right now. Also coordinating with SIG on certificate work.
Right, you mean the two main things in the main repo?
Yeah.
Cool. So does that seem like those two things would be good to work on and just figure out what we're going to break down the work for?
Sorry.
Well, so it's interesting because both of those things are things we're working on in the main repo, but also things we're working on as part of KubeAdmin as the product, right? So the Bootstrap checkpointing is a dependency of KubeAdmin self-hosting that is a feature effectively we're adding to Kubernetes proper to enable KubeAdmin self-hosting. So how do you think we should track that? Should we say that the KEP is really the self-hosting, KubeAdmin self-host clusters, and a dependency of that KEP is Bootstrap checkpointing?
That's what I would do. Yeah.
The KEPs themselves actually have, the pointing to parents bit inside of them.
Okay.
So
both then.
Yeah, so we should fill out the KEPs to point to each other. The problem is you need to transform a lot of the current proposals into KEP style format in order for you to make the whole tree make sense, right? Otherwise, it's kind of like you have this partial tree that links to these old documents that are not all maintained over time. And the purpose of the KEP too is not to be like you create it once and magically you don't deal with it. The KEP itself has sections for updates for each individual cycle, so that way it's a live, living document over time that actually reflects reality. Because if you actually go through the community repo right now, it's like a wasteland of false ideas that no longer either apply or that have totally changed since the original proposal was written.
Okay, so the intent is to keep basically the KEPs in markdown format in the community repository.
Yes.
Well, they have a markdown section, or sorry, yes, they're a markdown format in the community repository with a metadata section that allows for the linking and everything else.
Right.
And so for something like kubeadmin, which right now is part of the Kubernetes/Kubernetes repo, but we intend to move out, would we put our kubeadmin specific keps in Markdown in our repo, or would those still be part of the community repo? And what about something like kops that is already out of core, but is part of the Kubernetes ecosystem? Do they track their keps in the Kubernetes/community repo and with everybody else's that's part of the core, or would they track their own externally and only when they have dependencies that impact the core move stuff there?
This is a meta conversation that kind of tracks across both architecture and the steering committee. I don't think there's an answer for that question yet. And I don't think there's going to be one until we resolve the major question, which is what should live inside of the Kubernetes org and what should be pushed out, and where does it get pushed out to?
Okay, I guess I'm wondering tactically short term, like we've put some of our design proposals into the kubeadmin repo in Markdown to sort of streamline the process of getting them merged and pushed. Do we want to do the same thing with kubeadmin specific keps to sort of keep our ownership, or do we not worry about that as much with keps and just stick them all in the community repo?
Right now, we basically have just the design document in the kubeadmin repo, I think. The rest of them are merged into the community repo. I mean, yeah, it's really meta. I think I think that in the interim, while we spec this out, it's fine to have everything in the community repo on the SIG cluster lifecycle, and then break out as we move out kubeadmin and things like that. Also, I mean, with kops, it's a great question. We track features issues for kops in the main features repo. Will we eventually have like multiple features repos per logical domain of Kubernetes, or, well, I mean,
it sounded like the intent was to get rid of the features repo and replace it with keps, and that's why I'm wondering, because I know that
actually is the plan.
That Justin had started creating features issues for kops with the goal of getting sort of release notes with Kubernetes, so kops could be surfaced there for visibility. And so if the release notes are going to be built off the keps, then I think Justin can speak up, but he's going to have the same incentive to create keps for kops so that he gets that same visibility.
Well, there's also, I mean, we're going to follow, even no matter what the state, which repo we live in or which org we live in, we're going to follow the Kubernetes process. We're going to have the CLA, we're going to have the open thing, we're going to have the code of conduct. We're going to be a Kubernetes project in terms of standards, even if the steering committee, whatever the steering committee decides, like we're going to do that. So if the Kubernetes project uses keps, then we'll use keps. We will put them wherever they belong. But I think the GitHub organization is almost irrelevant to whether we follow this procedure.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Justin. That's exactly right. The idea is, it's really simple. We want to define some value that we want to convey to their community so that they know what's going on. We want to provide enough detail that somebody who's a new contributor could, or somebody who's a contributor that's interested, could look at one of these issues that's one of those ice cubes we chip off the iceberg and actually start working it and have some visibility that that's being worked as opposed to just being off in the ether and not being touched. So we're just basically trying to provide a way to track this work and give SIGs ownership, because having a centralized features management process is just a huge anti-pattern. That becomes a bottleneck. SIGs are the best equipped to know what should and shouldn't be a part of what they're working on. They're also the most equipped to detangle dependencies with other SIGs. We shouldn't introduce roadblocks and areas where people have to go through one another to get stuff done. We want to have as many parallel conversations that are effective as humanly possible. So I think that this is a step in that direction, regardless of if it's a sub-project or it's in Kubernetes, or if it's a totally separate project. We still want to have those same trappings, just as Justin had mentioned. So,
okay. So do we want to try to fill a couple of these in together, and then maybe we can propose additional keps for group review during?
Yeah, I would just love to go through one so we can kind of figure out what this works. Because again, this may totally not work, and I want to fail fast. But let's give it a shot. So these things, a proposal kept linked. So is there
one more question, Jace, before we dive into this?
Sorry.
one. Lucas?
Yeah, so I think, so what we have in the features repo today is basically one parent dramatically simplify Kubernetes bootstrapping or whatever that Joe created 1.5 years ago. That basically covers the KubeADM state as a whole. And we have these sub caps or proposals / features issues that cover like the self-hosting feature of KubeADM. We have the extensibility parts, config API things, and the AJ work. And then we also have the bootstrap tokens that are kind of not KubeADM specific, but a dependency for KubeADM, and also the bootstrapping checkpointing thing. So I think it makes sense to have like the top level KubeADM state of KubeADM, right? That is right now beta, and will not be graduated to GA before we have all the sub dependencies beta or GA or higher, right? Which also dependency like on component config that we don't even track in these features issues at all, which is like something we should start doing, because that is totally opaque to the community right now. What we check into our component config API groups.
I think for the purposes of this, let's just stick with self-hosting for the moment, because that has different sub issues that you want to work. I mean, to me, the bootstrap stuff is an issue that would be worked for that. The idea behind the section here that we're outlining for 110 is what exactly is going to be delivered in 110. If it's bigger than one release cadence, we'll just have to have issues that are basically across releases. So you want to basically define the issue that can be delivered per release. So if KubeADM self-hosting has 3 things that you have to accomplish, and you know you're going to get 2 of those 3 things done in 110, just do issues for those 2, and then the third we'll do, we could do an issue ahead of time and say we're going to work on it 111. But the idea is not to do too much front loading, because there's things that change each time that makes that essentially wasteful to do much planning. So I think a quarter worth of planning or a quarter worth of execution is on the outside of realistic, right? Because there's so many things that you run into along the way. So if we start with self-hosting, obviously we have sort of the meta. There's a feature, you said it was in the features repo. There's a sort of meta issue around all the KubeADM stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, so we both have a general KubeADM issue or features issue, and we also have the KubeADM self-hosting features issue right now.
Okay, so there's features repo issues. So KubeADM generally,
yeah,
and
the parent and KubeADM self-hosting. Okay. So for example, in 1.8 we had KubeADM was beta. It has been beta since 1.6, and now KubeADM self-hosting was added in 1.8 as in the alpha state. Okay,
so in terms of so if we're going to break down the self-hosting work that's going to get done in 110, what are the chunks of work? What are those ice cubes that we can look at that would actually be delivered? What are the things that you want to accomplish in 110 specifically related to
that? We need secrets checkpointing.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's, yeah.
Say secrets checkpointing solution.
Oh, okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's better.
And so that may be a spike, right? Because a spike or a research thing is a totally valid thing to accomplish. And maybe it's just an issue and it doesn't actually lead to a PR, but that's totally fine.
Yeah, and then we have like a lot of testing. Indeed, I don't know if that belongs there.
Yes.
Then we have, lastly, securing, like if we go with the certificates in secrets, we need to build a new security layer, or like use the security features of Kubernetes for this purpose. That is the right wording.
Okay.
So for example, Mike created the authorizer that could deny all. So will use that. So if you're an ingress controller and request the cluster CA, you will get denied. You will be denied.
Okay, cool. All right. So those three things. In terms of dependencies, this could be anything. What are the things that could get in the way or that you need to have in place in order for this to work? Just brainstorm or dump.
For the secret checkpointing, we either need to convince SIG node that we should be checkpointing secrets and SIG off. So it's been pretty contentious in the past.
Yeah.
And I guess depending upon the investigation on point number one, it's either work with a couple of other SIGs to make that work, or we build a workaround, which is what CoreOS has done in the past.
Yeah, exactly. SIG node and SIG auths. And then we have, I mean, this would put a dependency on the sub-cap, right, of general checkpointing in Kubernetes, right? Do you want to create such a cap, or that is not like kubeadm specific? Because what Tim built doesn't have kubeadm hardwired in there somewhere. So,
right. So essentially, the checkpointing primitive is key.
Our self-hosting relies on the checkpointing primitive of Kubernetes, right?
Okay.
Also, SIG testing for number 2 as well.
Yeah, indeed.
Rely on that.
That's a good point.
Do we actually have a dependency on them? Isn't it something we can just do ourselves?
I mean, yeah, possibly, but we don't. I don't think we know what those tests might look like. So there could be a potential dependency there. We might just need to.
We right now, one thing I want to improve someday is that every time we make a change to Kubernetes Anywhere, so like we're gonna move off Kubernetes Anywhere soon when the cluster API comes along, but right now we have to basically ask a Googler in SIG testing to push the new images so we can update the test grid. So every time, like I did this yesterday, and there were Googlers really kind that answered like in a minute, so it wasn't a problem. But if the right person might not be there, it could take some time to get the image updated so we can, like, because it's GCR IO, so only a few people have push access to these images, to this image repository.
I think someone is working on trying to shuffle some of those images around so we can increase the number of people we can push to them. I don't think that's strictly a dependency for this task. I think it's annoying that we have to have some subset of people, which I don't think includes me, push those images. But I think there is a longer term fix for that, which hopefully is tracked by somebody else's KEP, which will just sort of streamline the process for us once it's done.
Yeah, so I mean,
ideal.
Yeah, I think the 3 is good there. The 4 is more a meta thing that is not like just for this issue. It affects everything.
Well, yeah, but
everything
when it comes time to do testing and whatnot, those images could be a blocker, right? I mean, if you don't have the right images, that's going to be a blocker at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, what else? Throw them at me here. What else? What else? Asteroids falling and hitting the Earth, or I mean, what are the things that could put this work off track?
I think if we don't find a solution for the secrets problem, or don't find a solution that we can agree to, that would be the biggest blocker.
Okay. And so what I would say is, do we need to find a mitigation for that as part of the solutioning around that? I mean, should there be an assumption that there's at least a 25% probability that we're not going to find a solution, or how much do we want to hedge our bets on that?
That's like the first thing we need to discover. I think
Okay.
it's the discovery phase.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing here is this is sort of solving a known problem because Bootkube and CoreOS have sort of paved the way for us here, and in the sense that they have already built this. And so we kind of know at least that there is a path to a solution. And we've been trying to build on what they've done and upstream some of that work into Kubernetes core, like what Tim was doing with the checkpointing. And so, I mean, I think we have some potential workarounds that we can build if we need to, or we can reuse their external checkpointer.
Yeah.
Clean. I mean, it's the same thing that happened with the daemon set surge updates, right? Like we have workarounds we can do when SIG apps was not willing to add that to core.
Okay, so essentially, what would happen is this issue is going to be issue describing what needs to be figured out. And there's going to be some discussion, and at the end of that discussion is going to be, yes, we have buy-in from these SIGs, we're going to move forward and execute, or it's going to be close issue, this isn't going to work, we need to start a new issue that's basically implement bootkube or whatever that is to make that work in a nutshell. Okay, cool. This is starting to feel like we're getting on track here. So what other dependencies are we aware of in this regard?
This isn't specific to self-hosting, but this is more of like a 110 potential blocker. Like I'm guessing quite a lot of people are going to be out during December for holidays, and that's like 2 to 4 weeks out of an 8-week block, which is a big chunk of time of development. So we just need to be sort of cognizant of that, and that could potentially slow things down considerably.
I thought the 1.9 release was supposed to be the one where we didn't have enough time to build stuff. You're saying 1.10 is that way too?
Just as a conversation topic, a couple people have mentioned the fact that we have too many release cycles, and I think that is part of one of the conversations at the Developer Summit, which I think plays into this point that we keep on running into, is releasing quarterly has a number of problems.
Cool. I don't see that necessarily as a dependency per se, but certainly we can put that down in the risks because there is a section for risks. So release cadence is too fast to actually accomplish anything. Yeah, it feels like there's, I mean, just from my perspective, one of the things I'm trying to fix is that there's all this minutia and administrivia around these things that you're spending, 1/3 of the release on administrivia. That is not cool. No. Big fat no. All right. Anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay, great.
I mean, most of the things have been implemented already in the 1.8 timeframe. They were enhanced in 1.9. Hopefully we can do them, actually flip the switch in 1.10.
Okay, cool. So who is sort of signed up to do this work? Who's actually going to be coding? Do we have people who are tech leads on this work, or is anybody sort of guiding it, or is it just like chip away the entire SIG, or who's leading this effort?
That's going to be interesting, I guess, because I've signed up for the 3-4 latest releases on executing on things. I'm not going to do that for the next cycle 1.10, as I'm writing my final after secondary school exams. So yeah, volunteers would be appreciated, I guess.
I'm probably going to have to drive this feature to completion, so I will probably be involved. But I do think I would like other folks, because I'm not going to be 100% on it.
Yep, so I should have some cycles too, but I'm not going to be as involved as I was on previous cycles. So part-time, yes.
Okay.
Jimmy, when you say that, are you going to spend your part-time on this or on AJ?
Well, yeah, self-hosting in HA, I think, will take up most of my time for KubeADM.
It's interesting because this is, again, a dependency for AJ.
It doesn't need to be a dependency for HA, right?
Oh, yeah, I meant the KubeADM init and KubeADM join AJ thing KubeCon AJ is totally achievable already today, and it has been so for a lot of releases, which we're now going to document as well. Like you need to set up your load balancer or like run etcd externally.
Okay, so let's see. Anybody else volunteering to work on this, even in some small fraction of time? All right, let's leave this open. And
we have 20% participants on the call. I want to call out, like, you know, a couple of times we've had mentoring and getting people involved from the community, and we have 20 people on the call here, and that's a lot of people. And we have 2 people doing the primary load for this. So, you know, if you're looking for people to get involved in the project, here is a prime opportunity. Right?
Yeah, and just as a clarifying thing, what's the time window we're looking at here? So the 1.9 release is December the 13th, so I assume 1.10 begins on the 14th, or is that some kind of buffer, or what's the timeline there for 1.10?
Well, we can start doing 1.10 work now. I mean,
okay.
There's nothing stopping us. We just aren't able to merge the PRs before December 11th or something when code freeze lifts.
Yep. Yeah, we'll get the 1.10 schedule ironed out as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I've been focusing on mentoring this cycle. So I do think we have, like Robert now wrote, Fabrizio and Peter as possible volunteers and coders for this feature.
Great.
Which is great.
They both volunteered in chat. I'm not suggesting people.
Yeah.
I like it. Voluntold. All right, cool. Well, so there's names here. That's better than we had 20 minutes ago. So user-facing documentation. I assume that this is going to be like, how do you actually leverage these capabilities and all that? So either a blog or documentation in Kubernetes IO or whatever that looks like.
So there will be some, but not that much, because most of this should be like transparent to the users, and most users like shouldn't care. Is that the right wording, right? I mean, it should work just the same, right? It's just a different technique of deploying the control plane.
In some sense, it's an implementation detail, but we need to document that this is changing. Here's how you do it the old way if you want to, et cetera. Right? Like, we definitely need to add some documentation around what we are doing.
Yeah, and we already have these things in the Kubernetes reference guide and things like that, outlining its experimental. Now this is one of the things that need to change still, like for the 1.9 docs, flip things that were alpha in 1.8 to beta in 1.9, things like that.
Cool.
It might also be good to write the docs for the failure scenarios very early, because like that is I know like Kubernetes' biggest cooperator competitor like writes their user-facing docs and their PR release first, right? But the failure scenarios are the real tricky thing here, and will, I think, feed a lot into the design.
Yeah, fantastic. Cool. So who is going to be representing this release when we're in the middle of doing the actual mechanics of the release? Who's sort of our go-to that can help act as HA proxy for people in the SIG to help solve things?
So I suggested Lucas or Tim because they've both done this in the past. But if someone else wants to step up, I'm sure we'd love to have other representatives here too, especially if it's one of the other people who volunteered to actually do the coding.
Yeah, as said, I've been the HA proxy now for a year, but can't do it. Like I will probably be able to do it in Q2 or something, but not Q1.
Somebody volunteered Tim. Is that Tim? Did you do that?
What now?
No. So we just need somebody to be HA proxy for the SIG when we're in the release process, so we can get questions answered or test. Figure out who needs to troubleshoot tests and all that stuff. shouldn't be a very busy job. It's really like, hey, go talk to Robert, or go talk to Lucas, or Jamie, or whatever. All right, I'll let you all think about that. We definitely need somebody's name there, because that's how we actually get stuff done. So do you think this work is going to need any new blocking tests, release blocking tests, or
yes,
merge queue blocking?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Who's going to
new blocking tests, or we're just going to modify the existing blocking test to use the new default behavior?
Modify existing.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
Let's clarify that there. So it's not actually adding, but I think this is a touch point for a number of people. Like, people don't want to see new blocking tests get added. So we're going to change the existing blocking tests to use the new default behavior.
Yeah, and then we'll have these two modes with one is static pod hosting, one is self-hosting of the control plane, and we'll test both. Right now we have the static pod hosting thing as blocking.
Okay.
I mean, well, depends on how you see it.
So for documentation, who's actually going to be writing the docs that we sort of called out above? Who's on deck to do that?
I mean, are there that many docs to write? I think a lot of it has already been filled in, right? Unless I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
I think it's just a matter of updating. It's more of a matter of updating existing docs than it is writing new docs.
Does any human want to at least be point person on that? Because the docs person for the release is going to want to have somebody to talk to, or get that info. And by the way, the SIG docs people are super happy to help partner on that writing. You can literally give them just some chunk of semi-crappy documentation, and they'll make it pretty and do all that work for you. So,
given that we have representatives on our company that actually contribute upstream docs, I'd be happy to do that there.
Thank you so much. Cool. All right, we're in the home stretch, and I've got a hard stop at a minute till the hour. So, do we expect this work to get merged, done like in any particular time, or are we going to push it right up to where code freeze happens? Or, I mean, this is sort of an expectation of what is the level of effort required to get this done.
I think we've expected it to get done for the last two releases. We expect it to get done for this release, but there's some risks that we called out earlier.
Yes.
Related to secrets, mainly.
Cool. The reason I asked this question, or I want to know it, is because if somebody's depending on you for this, they're going to want to know when this stuff is going to drop, so they can start testing and doing integration work. Any other important notes? I think we kind of nailed it all, but if there's anything else anybody wants to add,
I think 110 is also going to be the time at which we make this default. Well, at least we plan to. So that's also worth bearing in mind.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So while we don't enable this like self-hosting by default in 1.9 is because we didn't flip the switch early in the cycle, right? So we then don't have the enough cycles. So Tim's PR, I think, got LGTM by SIG node on code freeze day for 1.9, which basically doesn't cut it for enough testing. So instead we plan to do this really early in the 1.10 cycle, so we have lots of a great validation period.
Okay, great. So that means that we're going to have to make sure that the documentation that goes out is just really clear in release notes. So what I would say is that's one of the big impacts of that.
Does that also mean that self-hosting is going to be considered GA for 1.10, or is it still beta or alpha?
I would say beta.
Yeah, I mean, kubeadmin as a whole is beta, so I don't think we can call. I mean, it's as GA as kubeadmin is. I think that's what we would say.
Exactly. Yeah,
Cool.
It gets up to the same level, and then when we have everything at beta level, we can make take the step to GA, that we have all dependencies ready.
So this is net new work, right? I mean, it's leveraging some existing stuff, but at the end of the day, it's network. We're not necessarily fixing bugs, right?
I would say this more testing, cleanup, maybe bug fixing things. I mean, most of the things are here.
It's net new as an overall feature, but it's already there in alpha state.
Yeah.
So it depends on what you're looking for as an answer there.
That helps me understand. So we're essentially graduating from alpha
to beta and setting it as a default.
So hopefully it will be beta in 1.9, or like, what do we think? Should it be still alpha?
Okay, I see what you're saying, Lucas. You're saying it was alpha in 1.8. We think it's beta, but not the default in 1.9, and it's changing from beta, but not the default, to beta as the default in 1.10 is the plan.
Yes, I think so.
Yes.
So it's not actually alpha now. It's really technically beta.
Yeah, we're saying beta with this release with 1.9.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I think this is hugely important. So future SIG meeting, we probably should untangle some of these dependencies and start getting those tracked down first, because that means that these are going to drive out a lot of the stuff that happens later, right? Or either will or won't. So if we can answer these questions rapidly and get some buy-in either or not from this other SIGs, that's great. And I can help facilitate those conversations or act as an advocate for SIG cluster lifecycle in those, or whatever I need to do. Because I see part of the role of this this person who helps facilitate this as being also your advocate to get the work done. So I think those conversations are really important. So I have to go. What I would love to know is if this is valuable or not. Ping me in Slack, or ping Robert or Lucas or Tim and let them know. And we're going to try and refine this process.
So one question I have, Jace, in the past we've done this at maybe a little bit less level of detail in terms of each of these items, just sort of a quarterly planning tracking doc. Try to sort of prioritize, like, these are our P0s, these are our P1s. We can write up a whole bunch of KEPs, some of which will get staffed, some of which won't, some of which are more important than others, even if they're staffed by the same people. Do you have a proposal as part of this process for how we track relative priorities between KEPs within the same SIG or within the same set of folks that are working on it?
That's one of the big TBDs. And that'll probably come down to the SIG, just talking to the person who's doing the representation. Like,
excellent.
Hit this one hard or not. So, and I have a hard stop, but I appreciate everybody's time so much. Thank you. And this is really great. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Jace. I will, in closing, say I think what we should do is take the rest of the things we talked about doing for 1.9, especially the ones that didn't get finished, and turn those into KEP format, so people can feel free to keep hacking on the doc that Jace was modifying during the call. And I think in 2 weeks, so the next meeting after KubeCon, we should circle back and go through sort of the rest of them. And hopefully it'll be much quicker on each entry if the information is pre-filled. So,
sorry, did you say that the thing we want for 1.10 or for 1.9 should be kept?
So I was going to start with the doc we had for 1.9 planning, because a lot of that stuff didn't actually get finished, and a lot of it's sort of multi-release cycle work, right? So we had kubeadmin HA, right? That's still going to be something we're working on in 1.10. So that just kind of rolls over. So we'll still have kubeadmin J. We can start breaking down what the tasks are, how far we expect it to get in the 1.10 release cycle. We had better documentation. Is there more work to do there, or do we think what Fabrizio has done in 1.9 is sufficient? We have component config and trying to drive that across SIGs. I think that's going to continue. We had bootstrap tokens to GA, right? Did that get done, or is there more to do? We had add-on management. Like, there's a lot of things here that we should write up as KEPs and try to figure out, if they're going to get staffed, and if not, and sort of and see if then there's also new work to add in. So I think it would be pretty easy to backfill the ones we had from the 1.9 planning, and then we should go through those, figure out who's going to work on them, and then also see if there are things that are missing that we want to write down as new KEPs as well. So I propose that we try to do the backfilling and proposing new options offline, and then review those during our next meeting in 2 weeks.
Sounds good to me.
And we are now 2 minutes over, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And hopefully I'll see a bunch of people at KubeCon next week. If not, I'll see everybody in 2 weeks. Thanks.
Yep. See ya. Bye.
Bye.